Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
On the frigid night of December 3rd, 2010, 19-year-old Tyler Thomas vanished from the small town of Peru, Nebraska. A student at Peru State College, Tyler had been at an off-campus party, drinking beer and tequila, before she got into an argument with a close friend. Asked to leave, she stepped out into the freezing night, without a coat, and began walking toward her dormitory, only a few hundred feet away. She never made it inside. Shortly before she disappeared, Tyler sent a troubling text message to a friend. She didn't know where she was. It was the last anyone heard from her. By 3 a.m., just 90 minutes after her last sighting, she was officially reported missing. As temperatures dropped into the teens, concern for her safety skyrocketed. Authorities and volunteers scoured the area, but there was no sign of Tyler. Within days, attention turned to Joshua Kettle, a fellow Peru State student with a troubling past. Kettle, a junior sports management major from South Carolina, had a reputation that was far from clean. He and Tyler had gone on a date once, but she reportedly did not like him and had been avoiding him. Initially, Kettle denied seeing Tyler that night, but his story quickly changed. He eventually admitted that she had gotten into his car, and he had driven her to the Peru boat dock by the Missouri River so they could smoke marijuana. He claimed that after a sexual encounter in the car, Tyler accused him of rape, threw her phone at him, and stormed off. He then drove away, leaving her alone at the dock at 2 a.m. in freezing conditions. Authorities immediately suspected foul play. As investigators dug into Kettle's background, a disturbing pattern emerged. Another Peru State student came forward, claiming Kettle had raped her in October 2010, just a month before Tyler vanished. A third victim accused him of raping her in 2008 when she was only 15 during an overnight stay at Midland Lutheran College, where Kettle had been a student. In December 2010, just 6 days after Tyler disappeared, Kettle was arrested on charges of evidence tampering and providing false information to law enforcement. More serious charges soon followed. By 2012, he had been convicted of the 2008 sexual assault and sentenced to 15 to 20 years in prison. Despite exhaustive searches, Tyler Thomas was never found. Authorities, however, believed Kettle had murdered her. Drag marks were discovered leading from tire tracks near the Peru boat dock down to the Missouri River, raising the possibility that he had disposed of her body in the water. However, without concrete evidence, the case stalled. Tyler's mother, still desperate for justice, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against both Kettle and Peru State College in 2012. The lawsuit claimed that the school had failed to act against Kettle despite knowing his history of violence and harassment. Records showed that the college's director of campus security had recommended Kettle be expelled for numerous violations, including breaking into his dorm and sexual harassment complaints, but the school had allowed him to remain until the semester ended. In 2016, a jury ruled in favor of Tyler's family, awarding them a staggering $2.64 billion in damages, though they never expected to collect from the incarcerated Kettle. The lawsuit against Peru State College, however, was dismissed, with the judge ruling that the school could not have reasonably foreseen Kettle committing murder. Nearly 7 years after Tyler's disappearance, in October 2017, prosecutors finally charged Joshua Kettle with first-degree murder. The case was built on circumstantial evidence, his inconsistent statements, and his established pattern of sexual violence. During the 2020 trial, the prosecution argued that Kettle had driven Tyler to the boat dock, killed her, and disposed of her body in the Missouri River. The defense contended that there was no physical proof that Tyler was dead. However, after 9 hours of deliberation, The jury convicted Kettle, not of first-degree murder, but of the lesser charge of second-degree murder. In July 2020, Kettle was sentenced to 71 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 35 years. While the conviction brought some justice, it did not bring closure. Tyler's body has never been found. Her family remains haunted by the unknown. Without her remains, they have been denied the chance to lay her to rest. Tyler had dreams of becoming a teacher, was deeply involved in college life, and was loved by many. Though Kettle sits behind bars, the mystery of what happened that night lingers. And until Tyler is found, the unanswered questions will continue to cast a shadow over Peru, Nebraska, and those who loved her. On July 28, 1973, a seemingly ordinary evening in Wilbur, Nebraska, turned into the beginning of a mystery that has captivated many for decades. The small town, home to a close-knit community, would soon be rocked by the disappearance of Mary and Frank Oliva. The couple in their 70s had lived quiet, peaceful lives, deeply embedded in their community. Frank, a mason, carpenter, and farmer, had lived in Wilbur since 1957, after immigrating from Czechoslovakia at the age of 17. Mary, a native Nebraskan, shared a life with Frank and became an integral part of the local Czech-American community. They had raised a family together, but tragedy had struck their lives in the form of 2 children lost to illness, their son in 1959 and their daughter in 1960. By 1973, only their son, Frank Jr., remained. Though Mary had been dealing with health issues by the time of her disappearance, the couple remained active in their small town. Frank continued to work on odd jobs after his retirement, and Mary found joy in gardening and attending the weekly bingo games. Their life, while marked by the pain of past losses, seemed settled. However, that peace was shattered when Frank and Mary Oliva disappeared without a trace. On the evening of July 28th, neighbors saw the Olivas return to their home between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock p.m. It was just after dark when the couple left their driveway once again, driving north out of town before making a sharp turn east on the first cross street. Neither Frank nor Mary would be seen again. This departure, which seemed unremarkable to anyone passing by, would mark the beginning of an inexplicable disappearance. Days passed, and no one had heard from the Olivas. Their daughter-in-law, Shirley, grew concerned when she noticed the absence of her in-laws. She stopped by their home after finding that their newspaper and milk deliveries had been piling up outside. When she arrived, she found the front door to their home closed but unlocked, a detail that seemed odd but not necessarily alarming. However, inside, there were more unsettling signs. Nothing appeared to be disturbed, and there was no indication of a struggle. What really stood out was the discovery of Mary's 2 bottles of medication left behind on the kitchen counter, alongside her black purse, which she always carried with her. Most notably, the couple's beige 1958 Chevrolet 210 with the license plate number 225 to 910 was missing. It was the only thing that had disappeared without a trace. Shirley immediately contacted authorities, and soon a search began. Despite the lack of apparent signs of foul play at the Oliva home, law enforcement began to consider all possibilities. But no trace of the couple, nor their car, was found in the days and weeks that followed. As the search continued, one particular theory emerged that captivated investigators, Frank Jr., and local authorities. The prevailing belief was that Frank and Mary had driven their car into a water-filled sandpit, an area known for its depth, possibly as an act of despair. Frank Sr. had become increasingly distraught about Mary's declining health, and the theory suggested that he, feeling unable to care for his wife any longer, had chosen to end their lives together. Frank had mentioned to his son just before the disappearance that he didn't think he would be traveling anymore. He had become somewhat reclusive, and the Olivas rarely left the county by 1973. While Frank had driven Mary on occasional trips around the local area, these were mostly short, familiar excursions, typically south into Wilbur or to Frank's farm near western Nebraska, which Frank Jr. managed. However, In the weeks leading up to their disappearance, Frank Sr. had bought a Kansas-Nebraska road map at a local gas station, which some believe suggested they were planning to venture further than they usually did. Authorities initially believed that Frank and Mary might have driven their car into one of the sandpits in the area, a theory that aligned with reports of Frank being depressed about Mary's health and his desire to not place her in a nursing home. But despite extensive searches of nearby sandpits, no evidence of the Olivas, their car, or their belongings was found. The authorities were left grasping at straws as their leads grew colder by the day. 7 long years passed without any breakthrough in the case. Despite the diligent work of investigators, the Olivas remained missing, their fate unknown. As time wore on, the local authorities, along with Frank Jr., were forced to come to a somber conclusion. The Olivas were likely dead. They were declared legally dead in 1980, 7 years after their disappearance. However, despite this legal declaration, the case remained unsolved, and the mystery of their disappearance continued to linger over Wilbur. Over the years, theories continued to abound. Some believed that the couple had met with foul play, while others suspected a more tragic end, such as the suicide theory initially put forth by Frank Jr. and law enforcement. But without concrete evidence, the question of what truly happened to Mary and Frank Oliva was left unanswered. In 2023, a new chapter in the search for the Olivas began when Adventures with Purpose, a nonprofit underwater search and recovery team, took on the case. Specializing in locating missing persons through underwater sonar and diving, the team began a comprehensive investigation into the disappearance of Frank and Mary Oliva. Their efforts were sparked by the belief that the couple's car might still be submerged in one of the sandpits, as suggested by local legends and the findings of past investigations. Adventures with Purpose utilized cutting-edge sonar technology to scan various ponds and sandpits in the area, including those Frank and Mary were thought to have visited. The team worked tirelessly, navigating challenging terrain and using their expertise to sift through decades of mystery. Despite encountering a few false leads, including false sonar readings that appeared to resemble a car, the team remained hopeful that they might be able to locate the Olivas missing car or any remains. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts and numerous scans, they found nothing definitive in the areas searched. However, the search itself has reignited interest in the case, bringing attention back to the mystery of the Olivas disappearance. The disappearance of Frank and Mary Oliva remains one of Nebraska's most enduring mysteries. The couple's unexplained vanishing, coupled with the lack of evidence and the passage of time, has left the case in limbo. While the official theory remains that Frank and Mary may have driven their car into a sandpit, no one truly knows what happened to them on that fateful night. Were they victims of a tragic accident, a well-planned suicide, or was something more sinister at play? Despite the passage of over 50 years since the Olivas disappearance, their case continues to linger in the minds of many. The search conducted by Adventures with Purpose may not have yielded the answers everyone hoped for, but it reminded the public that no case is ever truly closed, and that closure for the Oliva family may still be possible. In the end, Frank and Mary's story is a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the mysterious ways in which people can vanish without a trace. The Olivas disappearance remains unsolved. As of now, the Saline County Sheriff's Department continues to classify the Oliva case as an open investigation. On April 15, 2008, and Marie Kelly, a mother of 4, disappeared from Beatrice, Nebraska, without a trace. The case remains unsolved to this day, despite extensive investigations and several suspicious elements surrounding her disappearance. And husband, William T. Kelly Jr., was the last person to speak to her that morning, and his actions following her disappearance have made him a person of interest in the case. Anne Marie Kelly was last seen on April 15, 2008, when she left her home in the morning to drop off their 4 children at school and daycare. William, her husband, had left for work earlier that morning at 5:45 a.m., sending in a text message at 7:22 a.m., wishing her a good day, and replied, and at approximately 7:30 a.m., she left their home with the children. At 8:14 a.m., and stopped at a Sunmart convenience store to make purchases. She was on her way to her job as a cleaner at Southeast Community College in Beatrice, where she used her key fob to enter a campus building at 8:46 a.m. A little over an hour later, at 9:55 a.m., and called her employer to explain that there was a problem with one of her children at school, that she would need to leave work. Ann's phone made a call to Beatrice Public Schools at 9:55 a.m., but it remains unclear whether she spoke with anyone. According to school officials, there is no record of a conversation with Ann, which is peculiar. This marked the last known activity involving Ann. By midday, William Kelly had attempted to reach his wife several times, sending a series of text messages starting at 12:29 p.m., but he received no response. Concerned, he reported Ann missing at 7:30 p.m. that evening, and authorities quickly launched an investigation. Ann's dark blue-gray wood-paneled 1991 Plymouth Voyager minivan, with Nebraska license plate number 38045, was also missing, further compounding the mystery. At 12:30 a.m. on April 16th, William reportedly found Ann's cell phone and a note addressed to their children at the family home. The contents of the note have not been released to the public, but authorities have stated it did not appear to be a suicide note or a goodbye message. To this day, no one knows what the note said, adding to the enigma surrounding Ann's disappearance. One striking detail in the investigation was the fact that Ann had not used her credit cards or bank accounts since she went missing. This was highly unusual, as Ann had been known to be financially responsible, making it even more baffling when no sign of her spending habits was found after April 15th. William Kelly's behavior following his wife's disappearance raised red flags for investigators. A week after Ann vanished, William was arrested on a traffic warrant, and in May, he was arrested again on charges of drug possession, being a felon in possession of a firearm, and providing false information on a gun permit application. Investigators found marijuana plants and related materials, as well as weapons registered to William during a search of the Kelly home. These discoveries led authorities to issue warrants for Ann as well, on charges of possession of marijuana and drug paraphernalia, though it's unclear whether these charges were related to her disappearance. The allegations against William extended further in June 2008, when he was charged with first-degree assault of a 15-year-old girl. William allegedly provided the girl with drugs and alcohol in exchange for a relationship over a period of time between August 2006 and August 2007. This case was separate from Ann's disappearance, but the charges raised further suspicions about William's character and his potential involvement in his wife's case. In March 2009, William reached an agreement with prosecutors, pleading guilty to several lesser charges. He admitted guilt on the weapons charges, but the drug charges were dropped. The sexual assault charge was reduced to 2 counts of intentional child abuse, and William was sentenced to 16 to 20 years in prison, significantly less than a maximum sentence of 55 years. Though authorities have stated that none of the charges against William were directly linked to Ann's disappearance, he remains a key suspect in the case. His questionable actions and criminal history cast a shadow over his claims of innocence, and investigators believe that his behavior may be connected to Ann's sudden and unexplained vanishing. A witness came forward with a chilling report from the summer of 2007, 9 months before Ann's disappearance. According to the witness, William had made several comments about killing his wife due to frustration over their finances and the state of their marriage. He allegedly mentioned that, because of his hobby of fishing, he knew of several bodies of water deep enough to conceal both a body and a vehicle, comments that seemed strangely prescient in hindsight. These statements, along with William's increasingly erratic behavior after Ann's disappearance, have led investigators to consider him a prime suspect. His potential motive for harming Ann appears to be rooted in both marital tensions and financial struggles. At the time of her disappearance, Ann worked 3 jobs: as a cleaner at Southeast Community College, at One Stop Country Store, and for a relative's upholstery business. Her commitment to her work and her family made it out of character for her, and to simply vanish without a trace. She had no history of disappearing, and her family and friends describe her as a dedicated mother who would not have left her children behind. Investigators have concluded that Ann's disappearance is likely the result of foul play, and they suspect homicide as the most probable explanation. However, with little evidence to go on, the case has remained open and unsolved for years. Despite extensive efforts to locate Ann, including searches in nearby areas, the mystery remains unresolved. No additional evidence has been found that could explain her disappearance, and her body has never been located. The investigation continues to focus on William Kelly, whose criminal actions and suspicious behavior have only deepened the mystery surrounding his wife's vanishing. Ann's family, especially her children, continue to hold onto the hope that she will be found. The fact that she has not been seen or heard from in over a decade has left them with more questions than answers. The pain of not knowing what happened to and is compounded by the troubling possibility that someone close to her may have been involved in her disappearance. As of today, Ann Marie Kelly's case remains unsolved. The Gage County Sheriff's Office continues to investigate. William Kelly remains the prime suspect, but no charges related to Ann's disappearance have been filed against him. Anyone with information about Ann Marie Kelly's disappearance is encouraged to contact the Gage County Sheriff's Office at 223-5221 or 223-4080. On the evening of May 10, 2006, 19-year-old Jessica O'Grady was last seen leaving her apartment in Omaha, Nebraska. She was heading to visit her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Christopher Edwards. She never returned. Days passed with no sign of Jessica. Her family and friends grew increasingly worried. She had no history of running away or disappearing without explanation. Her phone calls went unanswered, her bank accounts remained untouched, and her car was discovered abandoned in a restaurant parking lot. Something was terribly wrong. Authorities quickly zeroed in on Christopher Edwards, a 19-year-old college student who had been romantically involved with both Jessica and another woman, Michelle Wilkin. Edwards appeared calm and cooperative in the early stages of the investigation, but inconsistencies in his statements and his odd behavior raised suspicion. When police searched his home, they found an alarming amount of blood spatter in his basement bedroom. Tests confirmed it was Jessica's. Jessica O'Grady was a bright and ambitious young woman. She lived in an apartment with two friends, worked as a waitress at a local Lone Star restaurant, and attended the University of Nebraska with dreams of becoming a teacher. Her love for children was evident in her work at a daycare and her dedication to coaching her niece's softball team. Recently, she had taken a semester off from school to earn extra money, but her future remained promising. Jessica had also been navigating the complexities of young adulthood. After ending a long-term high school relationship, she was exploring new romances. That's when she met Christopher Edwards, a bartender at the now-defunct Lone Star Steakhouse and Saloon. If there's still any in the U.S., comment below and let me, as a former employee, know. The two quickly became involved. It was a new relationship, but in early May 2006, Jessica discovered she was pregnant. She was excited, but the revelation would set in motion a tragic series of events. When Jessica failed to show up for her shift at the restaurant on May 12th, concern mounted. She had not answered her phone since the night of May 10th, and none of her friends or family had heard from her. Even more unsettling, she had left behind her personal belongings, including her beloved cat, Zoe. It was out of character for her to disappear without a word. Her family reported her missing, and within days, her abandoned car was found in a parking lot near the restaurant. The keys were missing, and there were no fingerprints or DNA evidence inside. It was clear that Jessica had not driven herself there. As law enforcement dug into Jessica's last known movements, they found that on the night of May 10th, she had been at home with friends before heading out around 11:15 p.m. Her destination was Christopher Edwards' house. Phone records showed that she had called a friend at 11:30 p.m. to say she was on her way, followed by another call to Christopher around midnight. Her final text message, sent at 12:20 a.m., was a cryptic statement to her friend Carrie. No shenanigans for Jessica. After that, her phone went silent. While Jessica's loved ones searched for her, Christopher Edwards spent the weekend with his girlfriend, Michelle Wilkin. Unknown to Jessica, Christopher had been in a serious relationship with Michelle for over a year. Michelle was also pregnant with his child, and just 2 days before Jessica's disappearance, she and Christopher had discussed getting married. When Jessica vanished, Christopher showed no visible concern. When Jessica's aunt, Shauna, approached him at the restaurant, he claimed he hadn't seen Jessica on the night she went missing. He repeated this to police when they arrived at his home. Without a warrant, police were initially limited in what they could search. Christopher allowed them into his basement bedroom, but tried to prevent them from looking under his mattress. When they insisted, they found a chilling sight, bloodstains soaked through the underside. Christopher dismissed it as menstrual blood, but the extent of the staining suggested otherwise. Authorities secured a warrant and conducted a thorough forensic search. Blood spatter was found throughout the room, on the walls, ceiling, and bed. Luminol tests revealed attempts to cover the stains with white paint. In the garage, a trash bag contained bloody towels and a receipt for white paint, shoe polish, and correction fluid, purchased by Christopher just 1 day after Jessica disappeared. Tests confirmed that the blood in the bedroom belonged to Jessica O'Grady. The blood evidence painted a gruesome picture. Jessica had suffered a violent attack, likely while she was asleep in Edward's bed. Blood patterns on the walls, ceiling, and mattress suggested that she had been struck multiple times with a sharp object, though the murder weapon was not immediately found. Edward's explanations for the blood only worsened his credibility. First, he claimed that Jessica had suffered a nosebleed. Later, he insisted that she had cut herself shaving. Neither story explained the significant amount of blood at the scene, nor why large sections of his mattress had been cut away. Despite the damning blood evidence, the case lacked the ultimate proof, a body. The absence of a corpse made it significantly harder for prosecutors to pursue a murder charge. With no remains to confirm the manner of death, there was room for doubt. That doubt was exactly what Christopher Edwards was counting on. With mounting pressure but still no body, investigators turned to forensic specialist David Kofod, who had a reputation for finding evidence where others could not. In a second, more thorough search of Edwards' home and vehicle, Kofod made critical discoveries. He found 2 small blots of dried blood in the upper frame of Christopher's car trunk. One tiny stain was hidden under the gas gasket, completely out of sight unless one was looking inside the trunk. The other was on the underside of the trunk lid. In Edwards' bedroom closet, investigators also uncovered a pair of ornate ceremonial swords from Bangkok. These swords, referred to in the media as samurai swords, had somehow been overlooked in the initial search. They were now believed to be the likely murder weapon. Lab testing at the University of Nebraska confirmed that the small dried blood samples from the trunk matched Jessica's DNA. Additionally, a faint trace of her blood was found on the handle of one of the ceremonial swords. A retesting of pruning shears, which had initially shown no DNA, now also returned a match to Jessica. However, there was no blood on the shears, leaving investigators puzzled as to how they fit into the crime. Detectives formulated a chilling theory. Jessica was attacked while she slept on Christopher's bed. After she succumbed to her injuries, he carried her up the stairs, through the garage, and into his vehicle. He then disposed of her body in an unknown location before abandoning her car in a nearby parking lot. Christopher Edwards was arrested and charged with Jessica O'Grady's murder. Prosecutors offered him a plea deal. If he revealed the location of Jessica's body, he would serve only 10 to 20 years, with the possibility of parole in 5. Had he accepted, he could have been free before his 30th birthday. He refused. His father, Bob Edwards, was reportedly confident that a jury could not convict Christopher without a body and encouraged his son to reject any deal. It was a gamble that would prove disastrous. The trial began in March 2007. Christopher's defense attorney, Stephen Leffler, attempted to argue that there was no direct proof that Jessica was dead, let alone that Edwards had killed her. However, his defense largely fell flat. The extensive blood evidence in the basement, combined with the DNA found in Christopher's vehicle, painted a compelling picture of murder. The jury deliberated for 11 hours before reaching a verdict: guilty of second-degree murder and use of a deadly weapon. Edwards was sentenced to 80 years to life for the murder, plus an additional 20 years for the weapons charge. Even after Edwards' conviction, Jessica's family refused to give up the search for her remains. Investigators pursued every lead, scouring a 5-mile radius around his aunt's home and even searching beneath the newly built back deck of Edwards' father's house. A hole discovered near Cunningham Lake was examined under the theory that Edwards had started digging a grave but abandoned the effort. Despite these efforts, Jessica's body has never been found. In a shocking twist, forensic investigator David Kofod, whose discoveries had bolstered the case against Edwards, was later convicted of planting evidence in unrelated murder cases. This revelation cast doubt on the legitimacy of the forensic findings in Jessica's case. Kofod had become known for miraculous discoveries. In one instance, when forensic teams failed to find evidence against a murder suspect, Kofod conducted his own search and found a victim's blood in a hidden area of the suspect's vehicle. This pattern repeated itself in multiple cases, eventually leading to an investigation that uncovered his misconduct. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, serving roughly 18 months. Edwards' defense team argued that Kofod had fabricated evidence in Jessica's case as well. However, the Nebraska Court of Appeals ruled that even without Kofod's discoveries, the overwhelming blood evidence in Edwards' basement was sufficient to convict him. Today, Christopher Edwards remains in prison, maintaining his innocence. His appeals for a new trial in 2012, 2016, and 2018 were all denied. Had he taken the plea deal, he would likely be free by now. Jessica's family continues to seek closure. Without a body, her loved ones have been denied the peace of a proper burial. Despite years of searching and countless investigative efforts, her remains have never been found. As for Christopher Edwards, his refusal to reveal the location of Jessica's body has cemented his legacy, not just as a convicted murderer, but as the keeper of a tragic and unresolved mystery. And so, the story of Jessica O'Grady remains incomplete. A young woman lost to violence, a family left in agony, and a convicted killer who holds the key to the truth but refuses to speak. Christy Joan Nichols was born on September 9, 1965. By 1987, at the age of 22, she was living in the small town of Gothenburg, Nebraska, with her husband, Mark Nichols, and their 2 young children, both of whom were still toddlers. She was known as a devoted mother, someone who seemingly gave her entire life to her children. Those who knew her describe her as loving, caring, and deeply dedicated to her family. Yet, on the night of December 10, 1987, everything changed. A family outing to Pizza Hut and a visit to see Santa Claus at a local shopping center would mark the last confirmed sighting of Christy. What followed was a series of strange events, inconsistencies, and troubling discoveries that turned her disappearance into a decades-long mystery still unsolved today. That evening, after spending time with their children, Christy and Mark returned home, put the kids to bed, and then left them in the care of their trusted babysitter, Diane Jansen, so they could head out again. Diane had babysat for them numerous times, and she was someone they had come to rely on. She was familiar with their routine, and that night seemed no different, at least at first. Mark and Christy headed to a local bar in the center of Gothenburg, where they spent several hours before returning home just after midnight on December 11th. When they arrived, Mark paid Diane in cash and sent her home. However, Diane found this detail unusual. In all her previous experiences babysitting for them, Christy was the one who always paid her, and she always did so by check. Diane never saw Christy that night, as Mark claimed his wife had gone straight upstairs to bed. While it didn't seem too strange in the moment, Diane later admitted that, in hindsight, it felt unsettling. Why hadn't Christy come down to check on her children? Why had she broken their usual pattern? The next morning, at around 7 a.m., Mark was allegedly woken up by the children and quickly realized that Christy was not in the house. Despite his wife being missing, he did not immediately raise the alarm. At around 9:30 a.m., Christy's mother called the house looking to speak with her daughter. Mark picked up the phone and told her that Christy was still in bed. He later claimed that he had lied because he didn't want to worry her, preferring to look for Christy himself before telling anyone. By midday, Mark had taken their children to Christy's mother's house, asking her to watch them for a while. He then claimed he spent the next 2 hours driving around Gothenburg looking for his wife. But when investigators later tried to verify this, they found no witnesses who could confirm seeing Mark or his car out that morning. This was the first of many contradictions that would cast doubt on his version of events. That afternoon, Mark officially reported Christy missing. Only one day after Christy's disappearance, Mark moved out of their family home. Just a few days later, he packed up all of their belongings, sold both of their cars, and seemingly erased every trace of Christy's life in that house. When questioned by police, Mark provided an oddly specific list of items that he claimed Christy had taken with her. He said she had packed a suitcase and a handbag, listing its contents in meticulous detail. A pair of jeans, a sweatshirt, a bra, and a jacket in the suitcase, while her handbag allegedly contained a hairbrush, a pen, a lighter, a matchbook, a lipstick, face cream, a nail file, a small mirror, and a single piece of chewing gum. Investigators found his precision unsettling. Most husbands would struggle to remember even a few of their wife's belongings, let alone the exact items in her purse. The level of detail seemed unnatural, almost as if he had rehearsed it. Then, in March 1988, 3 months later, a suitcase and a handbag matching Mark's description were found at a rest stop off Interstate 80 near Maxwell, Nebraska. The discovery was suspicious. The bags were placed in a way that seemed too deliberate, almost as if they were meant to be found. Inside, the items perfectly matched Mark's list. Even more suspiciously, several crucial items that one would expect Christy to take if she had left voluntarily were missing. She left behind her driver's license, expensive jewelry that could have funded a new life, and even her final paycheck from her job. These were things she would have likely taken if she had planned to disappear on her own. As the investigation progressed, a darker side to Christy and Mark's marriage began to surface. Close friends and family members came forward, saying that Christy had confided in them about issues in her marriage. Mark was reportedly controlling, jealous, and even physically abusive. He would track her phone calls and check up on her constantly. Then came a shocking revelation. Just days before she disappeared, Christy had secretly met with a divorce lawyer. The lawyer later told police that Christy seemed anxious and had visible bruises on her body. During their meeting, she asked for advice on how to leave Mark and retain full custody of her children. The lawyer had been so concerned for her safety that he urged her not to return home. But Christy insisted she would take things slowly. She made a follow-up appointment. She never made it to that second meeting. Mark denied all allegations of abuse. He admitted that they had fought but insisted he had never physically harmed her. However, in 1990, 3 years after Christy vanished, Mark officially filed for divorce on the grounds that Christy had abandoned him and their children. He also began to claim that she had run off with another man, even producing a note allegedly written by Christy to an unnamed lover, stating that she planned to leave Mark soon. Police did track down the man mentioned in the letter, but after multiple rounds of questioning and investigations, he was ruled out as a suspect. Investigators remained skeptical about the authenticity of the note. One of the most significant pieces of physical evidence in the case was a small trace of blood found on the bedroom carpet in Christy and Mark's home. When tested, it was confirmed to be Christy's. Mark dismissed it, claiming it was menstrual blood. However, forensic analysis proved that was not the case. While the amount of blood was not enough to indicate a fatal injury, it raised unsettling questions. How did it get there? Had she been hurt that night? And if so, was it connected to her disappearance? Decades later, Christy Jo Nichols remains missing. Her case is officially treated as a homicide, though no charges have ever been filed. Mark Nichols has never been formally accused of any crime in connection with his wife's disappearance, though he remains the primary person of interest in the eyes of many investigators and the public. There are still no solid leads, no confirmed sightings, and no new updates in the case. Christy's family continues to search for answers, hoping that one day, the truth will come to light. Did Christy leave voluntarily, abandoning her children and everything she knew? Or did she meet a more sinister fate at the hands of someone close to her? Until justice is served, Christy's case remains a haunting mystery, a woman who vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and suspicion.